So we're Tilners, and welcome to a video about bears. There is a link to the Cambridge Latin course, I do promise. So, the main topic we're going to be talking about today is Ovid's Metamorphoses, which does indeed include bears. So, Ovid was a very famous Latin poet who, as you can see, first published his Metamorphoses in 8 AD. This was not the first poem that he published several, and they're all a bit quirky, which is probably why he is one of my favourite Latin poets. The Metamorphoses is theoretically about mutations and changes, and it's a story, epic story of gods and heroes and all the rest of it. But actually, a lot of the time, the gods and heroes don't come across very well, particularly not the gods. The Metamorphoses, as you can see, was published in 8 AD. This was during the reign of Emperor Augustus. Some of the time, the gods are behaving humans who behave badly. So, for example, they might be important humans, like kings and heroes, and sometimes they're just average humans who are too arrogant. On the left, we see the story of Echo and Narcissus. Echo was a nymph who fell in love with an incredibly gorgeous man named Narcissus. Narcissus, or Narcissus, was so gorgeous that everyone fell in love with him who saw him, and therefore he had a hugely inflated opinion upon himself, and he rejected all those who loved him. The goddess Venus was rather annoyed by this, and eventually cursed him to fall in love with himself. At a lakeside, he caught sight of himself in the water and was so entranced that he couldn't leave. He was just sat there staring at the water, and eventually he faded away from a man to the Narcissus flower. Echo, poor Echo, was sat there watching this incredibly gorgeous man until she faded away, until all that remained was her voice calling out to him. An echo, which is where we get the word from. Lycaon, however, kind of deserved his punishment. He was a king of a Greek region called Arcadia. When Zeus, in disguise, visited him, Lycaon, for unknown reasons, decided to be a terrible person and chopped up his own son to feed to Zeus, or Jupiter. Jupiter was not impressed by this, for good reason, and cursed Lycaon, turning him into a wolf, the first werewolf. These are both examples of what we would call etiological myths, from the Greek aiteia, meaning cause. Some of the time, the mortals really don't deserve their punishment. On the left, we have the story of Daphne. Now, Daphne was a nymph who, for complicated reasons, Apollo fell in love with, but she was the very opposite of in love with him. She fled him, and Apollo chased after her in an incredibly uncomfortable way for modern audiences, and eventually she prayed to escape him, and in response, her father, a river god, turned her into a tree so that Apollo couldn't love her. All kinds of horrible messages in there. On the right, we have the story of Arachne. Now, Arachne maybe deserved it. She was an incredibly talented weaver. She could make beautiful patterns. But she bragged about this. She bragged that she was better even than the gods. The goddess Minerva, or Athene in Greek, heard of this and came down to challenge Arachne to a duel by weaving. The thing is, Arachne wins the duel. She makes a better tapestry than Minerva does. Minerva is so annoyed by this that she changes Arachne into a spider, giving us the word arachnid, as she therefore could weave forever. The gods are quite often very vicious. And a lot of these myths come down to Jupiter behaving badly. Two of them here. Jupiter is well known for not being faithful to his wife Hera, or Juno. This is a bit ironic, considering that Juno is the goddess of marriage. On the left, we have the story of Europa. Europa was a gorgeous princess, and Jupiter came down to Earth in the shape of a bull, and for some stupid reason, Europa decided to go for a ride on the bull's back, because it was a very pretty bull, and Jupiter then just swims out to sea with Europa on his back, and yes, that's moderately horrifying. On the right, we have an even worse story, the story of Io. So Jupiter falls in love with another nymph, this one called Io, and is having his way with her when he sees that his wife, Juno, as we can see here, is arriving, and he freaks out because obviously he doesn't want to be caught in adultery. He transforms poor Io into a cow, which is a bit weird. Juno arrives, sees this cow, and clearly understands what's going on. So she demands from Jupiter that she get to own this cow. Io stays as a cow for a very long time. It's quite a complicated myth. Look it up in your own time if you're interested. But this is the kind of thing that the gods do not behave well. So, speaking of gods not behaving well, finally we get to the main story we're talking about today, the story of Callisto. Callisto was a huntress who served the goddess Diana, or Artemis in Greek. Diana was the daughter of Jupiter and Latona, a titan or a specialised type of goddess, and she was the goddess of hunting, of wild animals, the moon, and, strangely enough, childbirth. The childbirth one may be related to cycles of the moon and fertility. The reason childbirth is a particularly weird one is that Artemis was as a virgin goddess. She had no interest in any romantic attractions whatsoever, and she surrounded herself with other virgin hunters and huntresses. Mostly huntresses, but there were a few hunters, and these were her attendants who followed her. One of them was Callisto. Now Callisto was very beautiful, and so when Jupiter saw her, he decided he wanted to go love Callisto. So what he does is, rather than disguising himself in the shape of an animal, like he did with some of the others, instead he disguises himself, wait for it, in the shape of Diana, his daughter. He then goes down and finds Callisto, who's obviously quite happy to see her mistress, and she says hello, and then Jupiter, in the shape of his daughter, starts kissing Callisto, who starts freaking out, and then Ovid's pretty clear, Callisto is not interested in this, and Jupiter, in the shape of his daughter, forces himself on her, because horrors and nightmares. Somehow, he manages to get Callisto pregnant. The first thing that happens, because the gods are terrible, terrible people, Diana finds out that her attendant is pregnant and kicks her out, because obviously she's only got virgin hunters and huntresses. This is problems. However, more problems is Callisto gives birth to a son called Arcas. Juno, remember, that's Jupiter's wife, finds out about this and is not happy. So now we've got a bit of quotation from Ovid here. When she turned her angry eyes and mind to thought of him, she cried out, "Nothing more was needed, you adulteress, than your fertility and your marking the insults on me by giving birth, making public my Jupiter's crime. You'll not carry this off safely. Now, insolent girl, I'll take that shape away from you that pleased you and my husband so much." Now again, here's the horrors and nightmares part. Callisto, as I just discussed, does not want Jupiter, or Jupiter in the shape of Diana, again horrors. So she really tries to not be seduced, shall we say, to not be raped, let's be blunt. And then Juno punishes her effectively for being raped. Wow. At this, she clutched her in front by the hair of her forehead and pulled her face to the ground. That is to say, Juno grabbed Callisto. Callisto stretched out her arms for mercy. Those arms began to bristle with coarse black hairs. Her hands arched over and changed into curved claws to serve as feet. And her face, that Jupiter had once praised, was disfigured by gaping jaws. And so that her prayers and words of entreaty might not attract him, i.e. Jupiter, her power of speech was taken from her. An angry, threatening growl, harsh and terrifying, came from her throat. Still, her former feelings remained intact, though she was now a bear. So, body horror here. Juno discovers Callisto, discovers that Callisto has just given birth to her husband's illegitimate son, transforms her into a bear, but makes sure that she still knows that she's a human in her head. She's trapped a human in the form of a bear. Probably doesn't look like that bear. And now Arcas, grandson of Lycaon, had reached his 15th year, ignorant of his parentage. So that's the baby son of Jupiter and Callisto. While he was hunting wild animals, while he was finding suitable glades and penning up the Aramanthian groves with woven nets, he came across his mother, who'd stood still at the sight of Arcas and appeared to know him. He shrank back from those unmoving eyes, gazing at him so fixedly, uncertain what made him afraid. And when she quickly came nearer, he was about to pierce her chest with his lethal spear, i.e., Arcas is off hunting in Greece and sees this bear look at him fixedly and run towards him, and he freaks out because it's a bear. All-powerful Jupiter restrained him, and in the same moment removed them and the possibility of that wrong, and together, caught up through the void on the winds, he set them in the heavens and made them similar constellations, the Great and Little Bear. So Jupiter sees that Arcas is about to kill his own mother, which would be bad, and fixes the problem. I mean, fixes is a strong word. He apparently turns them into constellations. Now, bonus points. Can you see the bear in this particular map of stars? That's apparently the bear. No, I don't know how it's a bear. Maybe it's a wolf, it's not a bear. There's certainly not two bears. I mean, I'm sorry, bears do not have a tail that looks like that. And that's not even a bear. It's just a block. Okay, moving on. Alright, where do those names come from? Well, Ursa is a Latin word. It goes like puella, so Ursa, Ursam, Ursai, Ursai, Ursar, Ursis, fine. Magnus is a Latin word meaning big, which you should know. Major, or major in English, means bigger. Obviously, we have Maximus, meaning biggest. And the opposite way around, we have parvus, meaning small, minor, giving us the word minor in English, meaning smaller, and minimus, smallest. So this is what's called the comparison of adjectives. So you have the normal type, the comparative, which is more something, and the superlative, which is very something. The Romans, oddly enough, quite liked their bears. So we have here a mosaic in Syria where we can see a bear is chewing down upon some poor gazelle. Bears were also a major feature in the arena. They weren't common because bears are, obviously fairly difficult to get hold of, but if they could get away with it, having a bear in the arena was a big showstopper. That would be certainly a central piece. Because as you can see, bears are huge and terrifying. And finally, another one which came up was exploiting bears for entertainment. Now this is a photo from Bulgaria from a little while ago, so it does still happen, although it is wildly banned nowadays in most countries. Basically teaching bears to dance, because bears are really smart. They're one of the smartest non-primate mammals going around. They can be taught to do tricks. It's just really mean. As you can see, this bear is wearing a muzzle, and his claws will have been clipped blunt. It's still a bear. If it hits you around the head, you're gonna, well, you probably won't know about it. You'll probably be dead. But still, very mean. As we can see here, Lego Bear disapproves. So why on earth have I told you about bears for a while? A, because it's fun. It's just interesting. Interesting to know about Ovid's Metamorphoses and the stories there. Go have an explore. There's lots of videos on YouTube if you're curious. But also because we have our story of Bulimicus Ultor in stage 16 of the Cambridge Latin course. And this is the handling of the bear. So if you were wondering, why does Cogidubnus have a bear? It's because he's got one of these dancing bears for entertainment. Think about the amount of money that would go in to have one of these bears, how much it would need to cost to get hold of it in the first place and to train it, how much it's going to eat all the time. Cogidubnus is basically showing off. and Bulimachus has decided that he wants to be in charge of a bear. Notice, skeptical Lego bear is skeptical. I wonder what might happen. Hope that helps. Thank you very much.